Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we're going to talk about One Battle After Another again. Despite not having seen it a second time, we're with my brother, who is our resident Paul Thomas Anderson expert. We've spoken to him when we saw Licorice Pizza. We spoke to him about Phantom Thread. He's a crazy person. He's a crazy Paul Thomas Anderson fan. You, I think, Stephen, have seen it in VistaVision and IMAX. Have you seen it in any other formats?
No, I've seen it twice in VistaVision and once at the IMAX.
Wow.
So, first of all, you can give us an idea, I think, of what we missed. What are the differences aesthetically? You know, what did you get out of seeing it in those ways?
Well, the VistaVision is amazing looking. The last time I remember seeing a film at the cinema in its chosen format, its ideal format, and being this impressed with it was when The Master came out.
Yes, I saw that.
And they showed the 70mm print in the West End, and I think I went to see that at least 2 or 3 times because it doesn't look... There is no world in which a digital version of the film looks as good as that 70mm print of The Master looked. And the VistaVision is really something. It absolutely shines, and the color is like nothing else, and it's crystal clear. And while you have the opportunity to see it, if you have the opportunity to see it, I'm in an incredibly lucky position to be in a city, one of the 4 cities, I think, where they're showing a VistaVision print projected in VistaVision. I will take the opportunity to go and see it. It's unbelievable the way that it looks. It's really something. When the first shots come up of Tiana Taylor walking across that bridge, it's like nothing else. And I will live the rest of my life with a Blu-ray of it, which I'm sure will look great. But
I imagine will also be cropped to a 1:85 ratio, probably.
Yeah, I hope not, because the VistaVision is really kind of strange to look at because it's 1:150, which is this kind of bizarre boxy frame. But I really like it, and I figure if it was up to me, I want to see the image as it was shot and as it was framed, and I would love it if I could get a Blu-ray that was that aspect ratio.
I agree.
Slightly different because it's cropped in on the sides. It's 1:43:1, so that it can fill the IMAX frame. So you lose a little bit of sharpness because obviously it's cropped in and then blown up. I really enjoyed seeing it at the IMAX, and I'm tempted to see it again just because I don't know when you'll get another opportunity. There is something about seeing... It was really interesting seeing a film at the IMAX that wasn't exactly shot for IMAX. Generally, when a film shows at the IMAX, it's either been shot natively on IMAX or it's blown up, but it doesn't fill the screen. One which has been framed for 1:150, and then you lose some at the sides and expand it. So it's a kind of a bizarre one. Generally, when people shoot for IMAX, I sort of, for the first 5 minutes, for the whole siege or the sort of release of the immigrants from the camp in the opening scene, I thought it wasn't going to work because I felt like you haven't framed the way that people frame for IMAX, which generally can be a little unimaginative because everything just gets centered. And a lot of the frame around it kind of gets ignored. Whereas in this case, it's not shot with everything center framed to prioritize the IMAX screen. So it sort of sometimes shots worked better than at other times, and sometimes it just felt a bit too blown up to make any sense. But over time, I got used to it, and it was a really interesting way to see the film. I would absolutely go to the VistaVision before seeing the IMAX again. But for certain sequences in say, the chase scene towards the end, it's like a genuine roller coaster because it just fills the frame, and as you're going up and down the river of hills, it just completely envelops you.
So when I came out of having seen it the first time, you heard on the first podcast that we did, I was, I liked the film, but I wasn't that enthused about going back to seeing it another time, even though it had, the interest of being in different formats, which I'm really into, that sort of thing. And then an IMAX projectionist on Twitter posted a few photos of what it looked like in IMAX, which is, very close to the VistaVision ratio, and obviously massive. And you saw it from his perspective, so you saw the audience there watching, and you got that sense of scale that IMAX gives you. And I thought, okay, no, I do want to see it like this now. And the only reason that we haven't come down to see it today is because timing didn't really work out. Like it would have been good to. And if there is the opportunity, I would still like to. And in particular, it was the thought of what that chase scene at the end must look like in that aspect ratio because going up and down those hills emphasizes verticality. It's up and down, and what's at the top of the frame, and is the car going to come into view? And that looked fantastic already in the 190 version that we saw in the IMAX Digital, but that must just look even better like that.
It does. It looks amazing. And another thing I would add is that PTA is one of the great shooters of people's faces. And I know the shots that you're seeing that have gone around social media, and like you notice that more often than not, the shots that are being shared are of people's faces. One of them is a giant close-up of Sean Penn. And to see those faces the size of a house, when you're getting them shot as well as they're shot and performing as well as they are, it's like nothing else. Yeah, I would go again to the IMAX.
Yeah, I would like to. I mean, we jumped at the opportunity to come down to see Avatar 2 when it was showing there, why haven't I thought that way about this until I suddenly I saw those photos and I thought, oh no, of course it's going to look that good. Of course it is.
And we were going to go down today until I realized that classes begin tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't afford a Sunday in London. Let me backtrack a little bit in the discussion, because I think we're at the when I saw the film, I thought it was fantastic and I loved it, and one of the best films I've seen in years, really, and very daring in all kinds of ways. But that was last week. And in the week since, there's beginning to be already a little bit of the expected backlash, right? So I had a friend on Facebook saying, 2 friends actually, on Facebook saying, well, I finally went to see it, and it was ... fine. Right? So kind of what would you respond to that comment? It's merely fine. It's the implication is that it's nothing to brag about or nothing, nothing special. It's just fine.
I mean, I put it really simply, I just disagree. I think one of the things I was thinking about going into having this conversation with you is that there is so much to talk about. We could talk about the film in and of itself, separate from everything around it. You can talk about the story and the theme and the characters, and you can talk about it on a craft level. And then there is a whole conversation that is worth having about where it sits in like PTA's filmography and how it relates to his other films. And then further out than that, you can talk about it on an industrial level, which we've sort of started by doing, which is, it's kind of interesting that we're talking about how often do you start a conversation about a film, really talking about the format and talking about what it is to go out and see this film as an event, because it's an event film. And like for me, and a lot of people like me, a new PTA film is an event. And there's something kind of amazing about a film of his being the biggest film that is on release at the moment, and it's been absolutely plastered everywhere for the last 2 months. It's marketing, and so to some degree, I think it can be hard to know whether or not what's going to start to happen now is just a somewhat potentially bad faith discussion of the film, because it's as if people think it needs to have a backlash. We couldn't possibly have a film that is this unanimous in its praise, and therefore we have to just kind of kick it in the shins. And I think it's a film that needs to have its praise countered with really like in-depth discussion about its virtues and its flaws. I don't know that just saying, yeah, it's fine, really convinces me. I want to hear more.
Okay, well, 2 of the points that they brought out, and I really do not agree with them, but just to state them, was that the film is far from anybody's idea of, a left-wing politics, right? On the one hand, it is all about revolutionaries, and yet kind of the film is quite, to them, middle of the ground. To which I have my own responses. But anyway, that's one of the criticisms, really lefty people saying, it's
not left
it's
enough.
Not left.
And meanwhile, you have the right wing will say that it's a left-wing film and therefore it deserves criticism. And it's where in the film are you being told that this is designed to be a left-wing piece of media?
Well, my response to this is, who the hell expects a kind of a revolutionary politic from an American studio system film. I mean, it's absurd, right? In a film that costs this much, that comes out of that particular context, I think the best that you can expect, which you very rarely get, is a loosely based progressive politic, which I think the film very much upholds, right? And it surprised me in its representations. It surprised me in its clear-cut avowal of state-sponsored racism, right? That, I mean, I've never seen it expressed so clearly as in, kind of those conversations with, what was it called, the White Christmas Group,
the Christmas Adventurers Club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, all of that is pleasing, and I'm baffled by that type of argument, really. I mean, I suppose the film sets itself up because, it cites Battle of Algeria, right?
Battle of Algiers.
Battle of Algiers. And of course, it's not that kind of film, I don't think, right? So that's one criticism. The other criticism, which again, I think is a bit trite and slightly dishonest in a way, but with some grounds, is, that it's a film about it's another film about white middle-aged men, right? And I do think that is, so again, I don't agree with it, but there is something there because, Leonardo DiCaprio is the youngest person in the film, yeah, and he is now 50 something, right? Yeah, so, and I do think that those considerations of casting are, to me, kind of real questions, right? Because I think the film might have been better with a 30-year-old in that role, yeah, that you can then age a bit at the end, rather than, have Leonardo DiCaprio play a 20-year-old that then becomes 50 at the end, right? And then, of course, what happens when you cast somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio in this role, and I love him in it, yeah, so kind of, don't take it the wrong way, but what does end up happening is that the film itself has to age upwards. I think that is kind of not just a problem for this film, it's a problem for American cinema in general. Yeah, that kind of, so many of the stars who can carry a film are of a particular age, and kind of there's very few young stars who can do that. So I think that is partly a legitimate question, though I also think it ignores all the fantastic Black women that there are in the film. Yeah. So anyway, your thoughts on this rambly question?
Hold on, just quickly. You said Leonardo DiCaprio is the youngest person in the film. Was that misspeaking?
The youngest man.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I suppose. Apart from, well, the kids. I mean, there are the school friends. But as kind of main characters go, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Sure.
I mean, the film is kind of cast around him. He's the central figure.
Yeah.
And I actually don't think that there's, all the other major roles are Sean Penn and so on, that are Benicio del Toro. They're all older than Leonardo DiCaprio.
Sure.
Right. So.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that really struck me the first time I watched it was just how long it took for Leonardo DiCaprio to feel like the center of the film.
Yes.
The first, I mean, we can get into talking about that opening sequence, because I think the opening 35, 40 minutes is just some of the best stuff I've seen in any Paul Thomas Anderson film. It's so fluid and it's so rich with feeling and it's so expressive, that the Perfidia sequence, I was really struck by, as well as just the sheer quality of it. She was absolutely the center of it. And then it was very much about Sean Penn. And it took a while for Pat to become Bob, to become a part of the story and to take on a certain amount of importance. And I think that speaks to, there is absolutely a discussion that's worth having about the fact of Paul Thomas Anderson being in a position to make something of this scale. And there's absolutely something worth talking about in the relationship between, say, Sinners, that came out earlier this year from the same studio, from a Black writer-director, Ryan Coogler, and this coming out at the moment, and the relationship between how both of them are being talked about on social media among everybody in a way that never used to be the case, which was everybody seems to have an opinion on whether or not they deserve to make money and what kind of money they're going to make, and the authorship and how it relates to the budgets that these people are given. I think there is an interesting thread in discussing one battle after another, and in the film itself, about whether or not Bob is the central figure and what degree of agency he actually has. I think you notice very, very intelligent and quite moving choices being made. For example, during that opening sequence, the Perfidia section, there's a moment when she is in the room next door behind a door complaining about all he does is pay attention to the kid, and my nipples hurt and I'm in pain.
I love that scene, yes.
And you're outside the room with him, and there's something that I think is absolutely speaks to, that is the experience of Bob in this circumstance. And I think it speaks to, without, like, you know a certain amount about an artist's personal life, but a certain amount. So I think you want to be careful about how much you project self-portraiture onto their work. But it's well known that PTA is married to Maya Rudolph, or is long-term partners with her, and she's a mixed race woman, and so he has mixed race kids. And I think it speaks to his experience that he places that scene outside the room where she is. He doesn't put himself inside it as if he knows that experience. He puts us with Bob outside the room.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I thought, for me, the greatest impact that scene made was the recognition of how rarely it is to see women who are not maternal, who are maybe suffering from postpartum depression, who also feel that their identity is being taken away from them, that, their partner is now kind of paying attention to the child and basically kind of rejecting them. And i.e., that you have a kind of a portrait of a mother that kind of goes against all of the acknowledged cliches or tropes of that type of representation. It's very rarely to see a woman that kind of, I don't know, sad and angry, and rejecting the child, basically, I think. And I love that in the film.
Yeah, in some way, it seems like it's a story about, Perfidia's story is sort of about this. It's like it takes on the myth that the woman can have it all. Like, she has made her vocation and her career, as it were, this sort of unstoppable, uncontainable revolutionary spirit. And there's something kind of fascinatingly like compulsive about it. And the way that it's tied to sex is kind of interesting and makes it part of a whole continuity in PTA's films about people's relationship with sex and sexuality and compulsion. And she can't make the two fit together. I mean, the scene where she walks out on Bob and the kid, or Pat and the kid, is, having now seen it 3 times, like, it reaches this point where she says, "This is a new consciousness." And the more I've seen it, the more it looks like she's saying it, but she doesn't quite have her heart in it. And she is so at war with herself. And I think in some way that reflects the Sean Penn character, who I think his physicality is the war that he's having with himself made manifest. He is making a choice when he is first invited to join the Christmas Adventurers. He makes a choice to lie about having had a relationship with a black woman, and you watch him in real time make a decision to kill someone or potentially kill a child so that he can full scale go white supremacist. And it's done very, very movingly. There are 3 moments in the film when the sort of overture music plays at the opening for Perfidia, and it plays much later on for Willa when she meets Lockjaw in that chapel. And in between the two, it's the moment after he meets Tony Goldwyn for the first time, and he says, "No, I'm clear, like, you can investigate me, I'm all good." And he walks away, and the shot holds on his face, and you look at these kind of tears in his eyes, and the shot is just kind of slightly slow motion. And it's this kind of eulogy for, or requiem for, the part of him that may have still been a good man. But he is making a decision to go full bore, self-destruction, full on white supremacist. And it's it's so beyond sad.
It's interesting that you say this, because I was reading Paul Schrader on the film, who kind of, was full of admiration for PTA's filmmaking, but he said that ultimately he didn't care about any of the characters. So what is your view of that?
Yeah, I read the same thing. I can sort of understand it. I'm very, very attached to a lot of PTA's films, but I really can understand people not finding themselves emotionally attached to some of the characters. And I wonder if, to a degree, I am attached to some of them as strongly as I am, because I just have I think I am in the sensibility of this filmmaker, and I think I understand his subjects. So I think I am inclined to find more in these characters, even if they aren't being signaled in ways that are digestible or on the surface for other audience members. Which I don't mean for that to sound like, no, I just get it and you don't get it. But I think there is a degree to which you can just understand somebody's interests and their subject matter in a way that I see a lot more in it than he may even be intending.
Explain it to me, because, so for example, the thing about Perfidia is it's very difficult to identify. I mean, I love her, and I think Teyana Taylor is a huge new star.
Yeah.
I love her look, I love her sexiness, etc. But it's very difficult to identify with that character, who is like kind of, quite a ruthless revolutionary, and kind of, it's very difficult to find much appeal with the Leonardo DiCaprio character until the end. Yeah, I mean, I love his bumbliness and so on, but it's interesting. He's playing a kind of a dumb, weak man who the only thing he's got going for is he's there for his daughter at the end, and the film becomes very interesting in that way. But he's a hard character to identify with or root for, I would argue. Sean Penn, forget about it, really. Yeah. I mean, I love the character, I love the playing of it, but if you identify with that, you need to see a doctor immediately, or to root for it. So kind of, that basically leaves the Benicio del Toro character, whom I really like, and was very appealing, and the daughter, yeah. And again, I like them both, but I have reservations about them both as well. So what do you see that I'm not seeing?
Well, I wonder if to some degree it's, if not always identifying with, I think it's partly one of the things I find appealing about his characters is that I find them exceptionally well drawn. So if I can't necessarily identify with them, or certainly not empathize with them, I think the key feeling I have with the Sean Penn character is probably pity. If I can't exactly empathize, then I can understand them in a way that I think they are very, very richly drawn. And it's an interesting one with someone like Sean Penn, because, or rather the Lockjaw character, because you don't spend a huge amount of time with him, certainly not in the historical section. You see him at work and you see him hunting these people, and then you see him in the present day hunting the same people. But I think his performance allows me to read an awful lot into him, and about, as I say, I think he's an interesting figure, because his sort of conundrum is he is completely drawn to and finds incredibly appealing a black woman who he fetishizes, and he can't compute that alongside this sense of purpose that he has, which is to be a military leader, to run an or to be part of running an organization which is, keeping kids in cages. And ultimately, he's something that we really noticed yesterday when we watched it, when Kate and I watched it, was she pointed out the thing that really hits him, and he almost chokes up when Tony Goldwyn is introducing him to the Christmas Adventurers Club, is he says, "You'll never want for riches or for the greatest of friends." And Sean and Lockjaw kind of like holds himself together in that moment, and you realize, I think this is a guy that is desperately lonely. And I think the thing he gets from being in the military, among other things, is companionship and order and a sense of purpose.
Yes, well, that was true of the SS as well. Like
100%. But I think I think what I find, to go back to your earlier point about people sort of criticizing the film for not being, maybe not being clear enough about its politics. For one thing, I don't think it's obliged to be that in the slightest. I don't think an artist is obligated to make clear their politics. I think the work can speak for itself, or it asks you to sort of tussle with it. And I think PTA's work has always been kind of thorny and not confused, but unclear, which doesn't mean that he doesn't have a point of view. I think there are things which are unbelievably obvious that are points of view that I would put money on him having, and there are others which are slightly more unclear. I think in this there is a very significant moment when you cut from DiCaprio meeting with the history teacher, and at the end of that scene he says, "My daughter grew up without her mom," and the history teacher says, "Yeah, that can be very difficult on a young child," and it immediately cuts to two soldiers coming to see Lockjaw, and it's a shot of two soldiers walking through two cages full of kids.
Yes.
And I think there is absolutely no doubt that PTA is not a fan of any regime, that I'm assuming based on that. I don't think he's any fan of any regime, left wing, right wing, or whatever, that is separating parents from children in that way. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Then you also have sequences like, Michael, you talked about this on the previous podcast, the film's relationship, or Bob's relationship and the film's relationship, with what you described as therapy speak. I don't think he's in the same film, the same character, 25 minutes apart, is genuinely, I think, interested in making sure that he doesn't misgender one of his daughter's friends. I don't think he's taking the piss when he asks, is it a he or a she, or transitioning? Yeah. Okay, I just want to be polite. And then in a stressful moment, he's calling a guy on the other end of the phone a fucking retard because he won't get him, he won't let him through to get the rendezvous point to save his daughter. And I think that sort of leads to what I think ultimately the politics of the film are subservient to, or sit left wing, right wing is not the most important issue. The most important issue is which of these two fathers will actually take care of their child. And that's where the film that's the point the film reaches, is that this is about somebody who is actually your dad, who will take care of you.
Yes.
And I think that's where his politics is, I think, which you could be ungenerous and argue is just like, oh, a simple point. But I think the film creates a very, very compelling argument for that being of overwhelming importance, and left-right divides not being the key thing that is worth arguing about.
I think people are minimizing those things in the film, and I wonder to what extent, well, and not to be mean or dismissive, but you wonder, do these people go to the movies, right? Because, even the representation of the America that the film shows, then the dexterousness with which it takes on questions of race and gender and things like motherhood and fatherhood in quite complex ways, I think. Yeah, within all of that. To me, it kind of seemed quite astonishing. I think those are things that the film kind of takes on in kind of very thoughtful ways, that it then kind of dramatizes through humor. I mean, it's a very, very funny film. Yeah. So kind of, and it's very loose, and funny about very serious things. Yeah. So I kind of, I don't understand where this kind of backlash comes, unless it's just people without context. Yeah. Kind of, people who might be watching their Renoir videos on a regular basis, but who no longer go to the movies. Because I think in the present context, this is a film that to me stands out, right, for its politics, for its representation, for the various kind of discourses that it seems to be verbalizing, imaging kind of so dexterously.
Yeah, I have the same I will rant about the same thing plenty of the time after I see a film or after I'm in reading reviews and going like, people are idiots and culture is just absolutely dying. And I'm sure that I am far less cultured than a lot of people, and I'm far more cultured than some, but it's unfair to have that kind of arrogance. That being said, I do think there is a kind of unpleasant strain in the way that films are treated, which is that I'm going to see a film in an ideal world with a film that I want a full experience with a film, like a One Battle After Another. And I think part of what that full experience entails is starting a relationship with something. I don't want to go to the cinema to see a statement laid out. I want a film, and I want the film to be something that I can wrestle with and that I can get involved with and that I can have an ongoing conversation with and that I can be challenged by. I don't like the idea of seeing a film that if you can write the message of the film down, then why bother making the film? I want the film to be a complex experience. And I think if there are frustrations with One Battle After Another, then it may be because it's not making any clear statement about any one thing besides, I mean, you joked about it on the podcast last week, but it's a fair point, Michael. It's like, what does a parent do? They don't send their kid off to get murdered by racists. They take them home. They take care of them. And then ultimately, beyond that, how does the film end? Like, if you want to kind of infer what's the great meaning of the film, take the end and work backwards. Well, it's about her going out to live her own life, and he wishes her safety. And she jokes that, like, I'm not going to be safe. And she goes out, and it is the most triumphant sounding thing in the world. An American Girl plays. And it's like, that's what the film's standing for, is for time moves on and things change and things revolve, but they revolve with adaptation development. That's a really dull way of putting it, but I think the end of the film is a kind of, it is so optimistic and it's so genuine, and it also has this kind of interesting realist, sardonic, not head in the clouds ending or tone to it, which is that, well, the end of the film is DiCaprio taking a selfie, and it's like there's this kind of odd feeling about, from a filmmaker that is on record as not being a fan of iPhones and hasn't wanted to make a film set in the present day for a long time because he's had to deal with the whole phone of it all. There's something kind of brilliant about the end of the film being this guy taking a sort of cheerful selfie of himself while his daughter goes out into the world. And I think it's kind of very finely balanced that way.
We've talked a little bit about the thematics of the film, the film's various themes and representations. Let's talk a little bit about the filmmaking, because I found it astonishing, and not just for the chase scene that everybody's talking about, that, in many ways to me reminded me of some kind of suspenseful experimental film or something, which I thought was brilliant, right?
It also really reminds me, just sorry to jump in, of like 70s filmmaking. I haven't really thought about it at the time, but I think the film, despite the fact it's got phones in it that can take selfies, really feels like a world drawn from the 70s. And the filmmaking has an aspect of that too. And that chasing, I was thinking, yeah, that's like Vanishing Point. It's like Bullet. It's like it's these things of suspense in the desert with one car following another. You haven't seen that in a very long time, I don't think. Filmmaking chases don't feel like that anymore. It feels like a real throwback, and yet it also feels like something very new has been found in the way that this is happening. I loved it.
I mean, I think for me, I find the filmmaking very loose in a way, but also very precise. Yeah, kind of, there are shots kind of where you're seeing reflections, from the other side of the window that are kind of very expressive. Everything seems to be so precise, and yet it's a precision that's meant to evoke a kind of a looseness of action, of thinking, of movement, really. What are some of your favorite kind of moments of, or some of the things you admire about the filmmaking and that you can think of at the moment?
I think I agree with you, and I think you touched on that relationship between looseness and control last week, and it is kind of staggering to have, as well as just the sheer quality of it. Now, it's been lovely to see the development across his films, because I think, Michael, you described it this way last week. Like, there is something very, very, very controlled about Boogie Nights and Magnolia, and like you can look at the scripts of those films and he has them planned out to a T.
Formal rigidity I was talking about.
Right. And I think those films are also very, very rich with feeling, but he has decided how the whole thing is going to look. And it's a real achievement that he can pull that off and that it works as well as it does when it works as well as it does. But I think what you really started to see with in parts of There Will Be Blood and then really in The Master, which is the one for me, was he has found this sensibility, and it is about understanding the world in such detail and having, for one thing, a production designer who is doing exceptional work. I mean, he's worked with a few different production designers, but everybody he's worked with, and particularly I think her name's Florencia Martin, the production designer of One Battle After Another, is doing unbelievably good work. And it allows the world, with a production designer that good doing such good work, the world can be so vivid that he can be loose inside of it. And everything, you have this amazing feeling of films that don't feel invented. They feel like you have somehow been dropped into an existing world and you can move wherever you want inside of it. And part of that is because he knows how to, he doesn't give you period pieces where you start off with some giant crane shot showing off just how much money we've spent redesigning 1970 something. What you'll do is you will have, in Inherent Vice, there's a shot I really like, which is inside Doc's car. And it's a profile on him and you can see 1970 rather, outside the window. He doesn't labor over showing you the design of 1970. He lets that exist in the background and it creates such a vivid sense of the world. And then on top of that, you have a director who can roll with the punches and block with his actors so fluidly and with such a sense of meaning and dynamism and purpose that, I mean, there are sequences in One Battle After Another which, knowing the stories that have started to come out since the film's been released, you know now that they weren't storyboarded and they weren't planned ahead of time. They were changed as production was ongoing because he's also developed his own store and the way he works with his team, which has a little bit of the kind of Mike Leigh approach to it, which is that production gets underway and the budget and the schedule is managed in such a way that we can shoot a scene for a couple of days, but we've got the location and some time booked for the following 3 days so that if it's not working, we can go back in and we can readjust it. The entire central sequence with the Sensei Sergio sequence, that whole sequence in the apartment complex, it's since come out. And it is as impressive as it sounds. I know it's hype, but I think it's worth praising. Was not scripted that way. I haven't seen the script, but it was scripted as two guys in an apartment, and Benicio del Toro comes in with these ideas about this kind of underground railroad, and it's redeveloped into this like breathtaking sequence, which so fills out the sensei character and so deepens the sense of feeling in the film and the richness of the theme, which is about the people that are involved, or rather the people who are trying to live under an authoritarian regime. I mean, I think Benicio del Toro's whole sequence is phenomenal, and I think his characterization and his performance is so beautiful. I think the way that he introduces Bob to his flat and the way he makes sure to introduce him to everybody that's there, again, I think works into the politics that you were talking about earlier of what does it mean that the central figure in this is a white man? It's like, well, I think Sensei understands that, and he makes a point, and the film makes a point of having a character who says, you didn't bring this to my doorstep. We've all been laid siege to for hundreds of years. You didn't do anything wrong. It's as if he takes in somebody who is only now realizing that if somebody is being stamped on for having a certain skin color down the block and their rights are being impinged upon, it means your rights are being impinged upon too. And Bob is coming to realize that. and
Yeah.
he deals with it in such a warm, paternal way. You could weep talking about it. He's so brilliant. I think one of the most moving scenes, as well as him introducing Bob to his family and his friends, I think the most moving scene on reflection, it like my heart just like grew wings when I saw it the first time, is when Bob is in the hospital. He's been arrested. He's been tased. And when the woman calls him Bob,
Mm.
and you realize that there are people here who will help, there is still a sense that there is solidarity in the world, and it's not do as you're told solidarity, follow orders because this man is the colonel and he outranks you. This is people who know that other people need help. I think that's slightly wandering off from your point about the filmmaking, but that answers your question in the sense that I think the central sequence with Sergio is fantastically good. I think the filmmaking is exceptional.
Yes.
And I think it draws out so much from these characters, and it is so rich with feeling.
Yeah. I think, I mean, not to belabor this point about the politics, but I think, the way that the film weaves in, the Underground Railroad, the kind of, the fact that this oppression is ongoing, cyclical, and has been going on for hundreds of years, the death of Lockjaw, which has this Holocaust imagery. I mean, so kind of, and we can talk about that as filmmaking as well on a conceptual level. Yeah, you could have done Lockjaw's execution in a number of different ways. Yet to film it with that kind of Holocaust imagery kind of brings in all of these ideas into play in the narrative that are suggestive. Yeah, that doesn't fix anything, but it kind of makes you think about them, really. And I love that about the film.
I think that reminds me also, just to jump in, because I think the way you're describing it reminds me of, it's one of the things, again, I like about the writing and the direction of the film is that it alludes to these bigger ideas in a way that is very skillful. I think I was really struck by the scene during the Perfidia sequence when, after the French 75 have all been murdered or imprisoned, and Lockjaw is given an award, and then it cuts to him pulling up to the house that Perfidia is living in witness protection. And it's like gloomy and raining, and he's got this bouquet of flowers, and she doesn't answer the door. So he gets the battering ram from the car and knocks the door down. And there are kind of laughs that pop up around the cinema when that happens, because it's funny, but it's also kind of desperately sad. And it alludes to a whole world of male entitlement and kind of rape culture.
Yes.
But without having a sequence where, oh, Lockjaw's a rapist and he aggresses on her. It's so, not only does it sidestep that, it gets at the same things, but it also gets at something more, which an outright assault scene wouldn't do, which is that it reveals the kind of desperation and sadness of this character.
I want to pick you up a little bit on something you said in this and the previous podcast, which is about precision, because I want to know exactly what you mean by that. I think you seem to be talking about it particularly in a visual sense, and this can only be so precise, especially because we haven't seen this in the format it was filmed in and it was designed for. We saw this in a cropped form in IMAX Digital.
Yes.
And obviously there will be like attention paid to the kind of areas that you can crop and the image that you'll be left with, but that's not the film that it was made to be. And also then Stephen's talking about, the fluidity with which Paul Thomas Anderson adapts certain scenes and will, what it sounds like, pretty much wholesale change what one character is meant to be doing in order to, based on kind of some reasonably recent ideas that were brought in by the actor. I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing to not talk about something being precise. It doesn't necessarily have to be precise. The antonym of precise doesn't have to be messy. But if something is imprecise but allows for fluidity and movement and adaptation, then, which I think is what is going on with this kind of filmmaking. Anyway, I want to know what are you talking about when you're talking about precision in this film?
Well, I'm talking about how certain things are conveyed in very express and expressive ways that you feel that the director has complete control over. Again, kind of, I was noticing all of these shots where kind of, the reflections were taking place. This is often kind of in relation to Lockjaw, or the rape scene, right? Kind of, which is, control of the actors, the use of a particular size of close-up in it so that it's kind of conveying something and doesn't veer into something kind of comic or laughable or derisory. Again, so a control of different things. So, for example, a control of tone when you have the Christmas
club,
right? Because again, the tone there is so important because it could instantly slide into the ridiculous, right? And of course, it is both ridiculous and it's also deadly and threatening, right? So I'm talking about control in almost every sense, a control of the elements of mise en scène, that are kind of, I think, very expressive and purposeful. That you feel they've been mobilized, for you. But then I'm also talking about things like a control of tone.
Sure. And so what do you think about that idea? Because we didn't put this in the podcast last week because it was kind of an argument about formats, and I was determined to win it, which I did. But we didn't put it in because I know my formats, and I was like, I know that this was not the aspect ratio that it was meant to be, or that meant to be, quote unquote, but that it was shot in and shot for. And what you said, again, kind of off mic because we didn't include it, was I don't believe that he would have done that. Made a film that is cropped in the form most people will see it in, and that if he has done that, I find it a really bad thing. Basically.
Well,
so the fact that he has done that and this has happened.
What I don't understand is why Cineworld would show a different ratio than an IMAX proper cinema, because you have control over that. You could shrink bits of the image to make it taller, right?
You can absolutely crop in the size if you want to, and I think people would accept that. I would like to see it that way.
Well,
but the way it's being put out in most screens and most IMAX Digital screens, which are basically widescreen in the way we conventionally think about it, like IMAX name has been put on a more conventional widescreen form, is cropped to look like a wider screen film.
I had just assumed that we were being shown it in the format that it was intended to be shown, because it was doable in this screening room that we saw it in. So that was kind of my only argument. So, but you have a better eye and you noticed that it wasn't. So,
yeah, well, I mean,
but I couldn't understand why it wasn't.
No, well, I mean, that's the thing is for wide distribution, people are happy to crop. I mean, it's the same thing. We see the same thing with Christopher Nolan films. He shoots a lot in IMAX. We see the same thing with Avatar that's been made for IMAX screens. And just when it goes out to, because basically there aren't many full IMAX screens. There are only 4, as you were saying, VistaVision projections anywhere. So when it goes out into the wider world, and most cinema screens are made for sort of 185.
But with digital screening, you can literally kind of show it any way you want.
You can.
And actually, I think it's a scandal. And I don't understand why it hasn't been made into a scandal. Because the whole argument against, seeing things pan and scanned on television, or having the ratios cropped on television. And here you are releasing works by major filmmakers in which the ratios are arbitrarily changed and nobody has noticed or protested. No. Yeah, when I think if kind of it is brought to the attention of people, they would protest because it's completely unnecessary. I don't get it.
I think people probably don't care very much. They don't see the difference. They don't care. Well, no, I mean, okay, at the risk of sounding very snobbish and everything, they don't see the difference. They don't care about the difference. They, and if you said, if they see something panned and scanned, same thing, they go, okay, it's still a film, isn't it? That's the kind of thing I think a lot of people will just think and not really pay much attention to or give much importance to, despite the fact that you can say, but this is not what it was meant to be.
Well, I think people who go to a cinema to watch a film do care about these things. But anyway, we're talking over you, Stephen. What do you think?
On this subject?
Well, why do you think that it has been shown in its intended ratio on an IMAX screen at Cineworld?
I have absolutely no idea why they wouldn't, especially in the age of the age of aspect ratios being played with and enjoyed the way that they're being now at will. I don't know why you wouldn't put out your mass release version of it, your DCP, as 1:150.
Exactly.
I think it's considered not the done thing. In other words, what I'm saying is that the way in which this film has been disseminated widely is not an aberration. It is the way that films that are shot in taller aspect ratios are put out. They are cropped them. So as I say, it's the same with every Nolan film. It's the same with Avatar. It's the same. Actually, I don't know if it was the same with Brutalist.
It wasn't.
Was the Brutalist? Did the Brutalist? Well, did it come to Birmingham at all for one thing?
Well, we saw it at the BFI, and it was shot and it was screened in the proper ratio.
Yeah, but that was part of the kind of. We went there to see it in that form because you were talking it up, Stephen. I wonder whether more widely it was also seen in a crop form. I don't know. Actually.
The version I've seen, the home video version I've seen, is the same aspect ratio as. But
Right.
I don't think it was put out. It was shot VistaVision, but I don't know that necessarily means that it was 1:150. But the version I've seen on a Blu-ray is exactly the same as. I'm pretty certain it's exactly the same as it was at the cinema.
Nonetheless, what I'm saying more generally is that this is the way these things go. I think in a sense, actually, I was going to say it started with 3D. It may not have started with 3D, but 3D's definitely been doing it for a long time, which is you can see the film in 3D or you can see it in 2D. You make the choice as the consumer what version of the film you want to see. It's not considered a kind of defining creative decision that's been made that this is the way to see it or this is the only way we will show it. You get to choose. And then on top of that, there's a monetary decision that goes along with that because 3D costs more. So you get to decide if 3D is worth an extra £1.50, which is a ridiculous thing in itself, But that's kind of where it starts, essentially, is just the idea that you get to pick your own kind of level of investment in how good you want your experience to be or how authentic you want it to be.
Well,
no, but I think part of what Jose's point is that there are still versions which there will be a decision made about when I buy a Blu-ray, will it be the cropped 185 or will it be the 1:150? I think there is something to that. And I mean, I could crowbar in a way of putting this point that takes us back to the film, which is that there is absolutely no way of knowing who made the decision. I mean, bear in mind you're dealing with a film that costs an enormous amount of money, and it's been publicized that, with things like test screenings, it's like who knows what kinds of concessions anybody involved with the film had to make in order to be subsidized to the tune of $150 million production budget. Whatever the production budget is, it's somewhere around there. There is no way of knowing whether or not potentially you have the head of a studio that goes 1:150 is dumb and artsy. 185 is what audiences know, and they'll kick up a fuss if they see some weird boxy frame. So we're cropping it for wide release. It could very well be something as personal as that. The reason I say is you could crowbar in a way of bringing it round to the film in that regard is that I think one of the things that's kind of great in the film is that it shares with Dr. Strangelove and the Sterling Hayden character this idea that world-changing, citywide, nationwide decisions are often made at the whims of one or two emotionally unstable men's issues, and often it's paranoias and sexual inadequacies. So who knows whether or not there is just one executive at Warner Brothers that goes, 150 is stupid. We're not doing this. You can have 4 prints, but that's it. Everything else is 185 because when it goes out on a streamer, it's going to fill up my TV screen and people won't understand 1:150 because it will be pillar boxed.
Yeah, I suppose the point I'm making ultimately is that I don't think the question, why has it been put out like this widely, is a sensible question. To me, it seems self-explanatory. This is the way that it's done. The question of, do we accept that? And that's another thing. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. I don't think there's any reason not to see this in its original aspect ratio, wherever it shows.
Listen, the irony is that when the Blu-ray comes out, it'll give you an option of ratios.
I hope so.
That is the normal thing.
I don't think it is.
Well, it is if it has different ratios that it's released on. It does give you the option.
Other films that have been released in different ratios, for instance, Dunkirk and the like, haven't given you that option on DVD. They're just put out in widescreen, 16:9. And what they'll do, because 185:1, which is kind of quote unquote normal cinema widescreen, there are various versions, but that's your typical cinema widescreen, is a little thinner than your TV widescreen. Then what happens is it'll normally be shown in that on your Blu-ray, and then when IMAX footage, which is very tall, is involved, then the frame will expand to the top and bottom of your telly, right. 16:9, which is a little thicker. So you will get that slight variation between IMAX and 70mm, which is what the kind of various things that those that was shot in particular. And so you will get that. You'll get this slight change in aspect ratio, and that's called like extended ratio and shit like that. They always try and sell it as something. But so even though they absolutely have the option to put whatever they want on a Blu-ray, that is what they do. They optimize it for 16:9 TVs and not for the original aspect ratio. I would be very surprised if I saw this come out in its original aspect ratio.
Well, I mean, I suppose if you're right, then it defeats my point, which I was going to argue that, why go to the cinema if you're not getting the correct ratio when you can then have it on Blu-ray, right? Which I think is also kind of a legitimate question. And I'm really surprised that cinephiles aren't putting up more of a fuss. I mean, if the director's intention is a particular ratio, then certainly kind of, what matters in the film is what is the frame and kind of what's in it, really. If you don't care about that, then you don't care about the film at all, in my view.
Yeah.
Well, it's tricky to know what exactly is the director's intention in this case. Like a few days before the film went on release, there was an Instagram post that was put out with a statement from Paul Thomas Anderson that described what it prioritized was seeing the film on film. And it said, we've got this out in a bunch of different formats. If you're lucky enough, you can get to one of the VistaVision prints showing on VistaVision, or you could see it in 70mm IMAX, or you could see it in IMAX with laser, or you could see one of the DCPs. Like, obviously, we want you to see the film, but like the way he describes it is go and see it as nature intended. Don't go against nature. Go see film on film. And even then, it's not clear what his preferred version is because 70mm IMAX is a different aspect ratio to VistaVision.
Yeah.
So who knows what his actual feeling is.
Well, let's change the subject a little bit. So one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning was to put this film in relation to PTA's other works. And I have a precise question, which is, what do you think the influence of Licorice Pizza has been on this film? Yeah, and I mentioned that because, to me, you begin to get a certain kind of looseness that's very appealing, if not quite as cohesive as it is here in Licorice Pizza. But I'm not a PTA expert. What is your view on this?
Do you think maybe that started more with Inherent Vice even before Licorice Pizza?
Yeah, I thought of Inherent Vice as well. Yeah.
But the looseness.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that the looseness, that capacity to bring the film to the collaborators rather than bringing the collaborators to the film, that starts with Punch Drunk Love, is my feeling. I mean, I'm sure that there are parts of it before then, because I don't think he started out as someone who is like Roy Anderson and has that degree of precision.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at Phantom Thread, which is in between those two films, I think that is a madly controlled film that to me has no looseness whatsoever. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that because there is.
And I love it, but it's not a loose film.
I agree. It feels extremely controlled, extremely precise, and everything seems to have been played. It feels that way. But then there is kind of offcuts that I've seen of basically an extended take of the two characters, the brother and sister, whatever their names were, fighting at the table, and it turns into a food fight. And I don't remember if any of that made it into the final film at all, but it was clear that they were playing with an idea and just in a scene, letting it go and letting them improvise. And so there is definitely looseness, quote unquote looseness involved in, looseness, improv, adaptation involved in the making of that, even though that the result of that film feels totally planned out and precise. And
I think you're getting it. I wanted to sort of mention this earlier before we thought about control in terms of the aspect ratio and how the film's being put out, because I think, Jose, what you're getting at with regards to control is, I think he has very, very, very well-honed taste for the ideas of the film that he's working on. I don't think Phantom Thread is controlled in the sense that it was written and designed to come out the way that it came out. But I think he has such a sense of clarity about the world that this is taking place in and the direction that it needs to move in And I think he shares that with his collaborators. And I think you can end up with something that is as precise as Phantom Thread, because sometimes when I'm doing classes with students, I've sort of described the job of the director, and certainly if you're a writer-director, as being, it's like the idea of the film is behind a door, and you're the person that's closest to it, that's listening. And people come to you with ideas, and you test them against what you can hear behind the door. And I think he has a very clear idea of what's back there. It's not that it is... maybe it's not that it's clear, but I think when an idea that comes in from a collaborator resonates, he knows to be able to choose it. So I think you can end up with something that is as precise as Phantom Thread. But I also know that Phantom Thread has, like, there are plot threads that were cut out of it, that were shot and that were like developed, and like whole sequences and whole elements to these characters that in the course of the edit got shaved off it. And in that way, he also, his approach has a kind of Terrence Malick feeling to it of, we're going out very well informed and with very good material and very well researched to find what the film is. And I think that really, that became clear. I think that approach started developing with Punch Drunk Love and with There Will Be Blood. But I think when The Master happened, you saw that that was the way that he was working, because that's a film that is so discovered and it follows its own line. And it has this kind of synaptic quality of like following the way that your lead character thinks and discovering its way forward. Inherent Vice is an interesting mixture of the two because it's so reverent to the book, but it cuts out huge parts of the book so that it can find its own. It finds the story inside the book that he finds most interesting, and really sort of hems closely to that. The question of how Licorice Pizza directly sort of contributes to One Battle After Another is an interesting one, and I don't quite know what the answer would be. There is an interesting discussion that's sort of being had about, this is like his crowning achievement, and this is, you can see all the work that has, you can see all the ways in which the films he's made over the last 20 years, while it's been in the back of his mind and being written, how each of them has contributed to it. But Licorice Pizza is an interesting one in that regard.
Well, to me, what brought it to mind is that Licorice Pizza is messy,
yeah,
and it's really funny.
Yeah, that's true.
I think also it has a focus on youth and young people.
Yes, that's true.
That you probably haven't seen elsewhere in his work, or at least to that extent.
Yeah.
Whereas here, in Licorice Pizza, it's a love story about these two young people. And here, there is this huge focus on the difference between the old and the young and the vitality of the young and that sort of thing. And the optimism at the end of youth being the future, that I've raised my kid right and she can go off and continue the battle. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that's the last time that children or young people was such a key focus was probably Magnolia, because there's a whole relationship in Magnolia of tormented children and of damaged children and damaged adults.
Yes, yeah.
And then, Licorice Pizza is about, I mean, Gary is like so charismatic, and it has this, as you say, I think I agree. I think that's the sense of optimism in like, the kids will be all right. With or without our involvement, the kids will get along fine just on their own. That's absolutely a subject of One Battle After Another.
Which feels like it may be a subject that is really derived from the fact that he's got kids who must be at least in their teens by this point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so seeing them grow up, that's going to make its way into your film.
I mean, one of them is in Licorice Pizza and is in One Battle.
Oh yeah, one of the nuns, right?
One of the nuns is one of his daughters. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Bloody nepo baby.
Again, it's like, as you say, Jose, it's like we could sit for 2 hours and just go, oh, this bit, can we talk about this bit? And then let's talk about this bit, and let's talk about that actor and that actor. Another bit I think is great is the scene in the car where Bob talks about, I can't do her hair. I don't know. I always thought that her mum would be the one to come back and take care of her and be a mom. And like, I can't do her hair. And it's like, there is something that feels so lived and understood about that. And it's such a lovely moment. And it comes immediately after she has found out. It's after the paternity test comes through, and so she knows. It cuts from her face, just taking in this absolute freak is my actual biological dad. And then it cuts to DiCaprio in the car, and it's this lovely kind of quiet moment in the middle of racing to the rendezvous point. He's just in a car with Sensei, and he's just kind of reflecting. And it's such a lovely moment. And that is, again, speaks to the film's quality of being so personal whilst also being so huge. In that way, I've thought with One Battle After Another more than I have with any of his other films. This is so much a filmmaker that reveres Steven Spielberg, partly in its incredible kind of linearity and crowd pleasingness, and its clarity about point of view and who we need to follow through this quite dense plot, and to keep things entertaining, but in its relationship to family and in its interweaving of something very, very personal to something huge and blockbustery. It's like Jurassic Park in that regard. It's so Spielberg. It's like, I mean, it's Close Encounters. The fact of the music that plays at the end between those two trust devices was like, this is a guy that has Close Encounters in his blood. And it's so moving when you hear that sound, and like they're actually together finally.
It's interesting that you bring it up, because the filmmaker that it brought to mind for me was Robert Altman. You know, for all those things that we've been talking about, of, you know, the looseness, the actors, the weaving of the different narratives, that kind of this does so well. But also how Altman's films, unlike Spielberg's, so often seemed like state of the nation films. They were films about America. Nashville is a film about America. And this one very much feels that. I think, had it been released at a time where people were more regular film goers, this would have been a conversation topic, like All the President's Men or something. And in a way, to me, the film feels kind of prescient, because we can't forget that Trump only got elected like 8 months ago. ICE raids only started like 4 months ago or whatever. And yet kind of, the film is representing all of that in a way that it couldn't have known when it was being made. And kind of, and I suppose I want to ask...
Although a lot of shit that Trump started, which is much worse now than it was first time, was happening the first time as well. There were kids in cages, very famously, in his first...
Yeah, but when you consider, I mean, I don't know when the film started production or, when it was finished writing, but, the things that you're seeing in this film are things that are happening now that I think it would have been, to me, kind of difficult to... what's the word?
Imagine.
To predict. Yeah.
But I think in a way you could argue that speaks to one of the themes of the film, which is that these things, everything that you're seeing in a 2020 dressed up in 2025 American clothes in the film, this has all happened before.
Sure. Yes. And I think that, the film points to that at many times. I mean, it has this whole discussion of, these things being cyclical and ongoing and, for generations and so on.
Yes. And there are both resonant. I think, again, one of the things that I think you were alluding to with the gassing and the incineration of Lockjaw at the end, there are both rhymes between historical regimes and the regimes of today, and there are very direct links between the two, because I think, and I mean, like, I'm pretty sure that in Pynchon worked for Boeing, and Pynchon wrote about World War II an awful lot, and he wrote about the V rockets, and he wrote about Werner von Braun and Operation Paperclip, and the fact that America took the Nazi high command and gave them houses in the US and put them to work on weapons programs and the space program. So there is on that front, there is a very direct link between American fascism and Nazism of the 30s and 40s, and it absolutely comes to the fore at the end. And it's
well, not the high command, but the scientists.
The scientists, yeah,
absolutely.
I think the film is sort of touching on, again, I think that's where it's kind of, as I've read a limited amount of Pynchon, but I know Pynchon well enough to know that this has really turned out like the relationship between Anderson and Pynchon is like, it's a really fascinating, creative relationship they have. Whether or not they actually know each other, who knows? And maybe that's irrelevant. But it's not just that one is taking the other one and putting it up on screen. It's that they share interests, and one of them is developing the interests of another. And there's a resonance there that's happening. This isn't a case of influence being, I will copy this person's work and I will start moving into my own place. It's like they share similar ideas. I think there's got to be a reason why Anderson is the filmmaker who, there will have been other filmmakers that will have wanted to adapt and maybe petitioned to adapt Pynchon's work over the years. Laurie Anderson, I think, has told a story about wanting to make an opera of Gravity's Rainbow. And she wrote to Pynchon and said, I'd love to make this into an opera. And he wrote back and said, that's perfectly fine. I'd be happy for you to do that. My only stipulation is that it is played on solo banjo, which is his way of saying, like, no. Whereas with PTA, it's like he seemed to have pretty free reign to choose what he wanted to do with this book. And I think there's an understanding between the two of them that their process and their interests they resonate enough that it feels like there's a sort of handshake going on between the two of them. Mm-hmm. And I think in PTA's case, I think he is someone who is absolutely absorbed in history and reality and things that have actually happened. And then he imagines, or he sort of finds stories from history and finds ways of making micro that expresses the macro of history. So you have very real stories about very well-drawn people that somehow speaks to a much larger movement in history. And I think in some way that rhymes with Pynchon. I mean, it's interesting that you described the new film as having a sort of state of the nation quality to it, because I don't think that's unique in his work. I know what you mean, and I think part of it is to do with the present day nature of it. But I think you could make the same argument, and I think it was sort of discussed at the time when There Will Be Blood came out, which was this. It was the sort of dying end of the Bush years, and it was a conversation about oil and religion and commerce versus religion and what has control here. And it's an argument between the two. And I don't think that's what the film is about, but it's in the mix.
Yeah. I don't think we were responding to the fact that it's set in the modern day when we said that. Certainly, like I say, other than the fact that it has mobile phones, it really feels that it's set in a much more vague sense of time. You know, the vehicles are old. Everyone's driving old, beaten up cars. You know, the weaponry that we see, to the extent that we see weaponry, it's very old. The places in which people live, they don't look all that updated compared to something from the 1970s. And the sense of revolutionary activism, it very much, I think, kind of feels like the past. It doesn't feel like the modern day. I think the thing that is most different about this compared to the modern day setting is the fact that people are actually going around setting off bombs and performing revolutionary actions and taking those actions. So when I talk about it as having a state of the nation quality, I don't think I was thinking about that at all. It is much more about the themes, the setting, the way in which it wants to convey an idea of what society is and what it should be in a broad sense. You know, the time in which it's set, pretty much immaterial to that, in my estimation.
It's not to me. I think that the time in which it's set is important. You know, and it has all of these resonances to all of these things that are happening in the United States kind of at this very moment, right? The organized resistance to ICE, the militarization of the executive, the taking control over it, you know, the making racism common policy, you know, from the president and Congress. All of those things speak to now, to this moment.
Sure,
but the last few months.
But what I mean is it important to that reading that the film is set in the modern day, or if it were set explicitly in the 70s, would that be?
In fact, it's not set in the modern day because, you have, what is it, a 15-year gap or in between
16,
the films. So okay, no, that I agree with you.
The modern day real circumstances to which it speaks, absolutely, but that it could be set at any point, and as long as it feels that way,
and of course, you know, these State of the Nation films have often used the past as a way of speaking to the present.
Yeah,
for sure.
Do you have anything else, Stephen, that is on your mind?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, go on.
Who are just because it gives us an opportunity to just go, oh yeah, that actor was great. Who are some of your favorite, as well as bits that you liked? Are there performances or characters that you particularly remember or liked?
I mean, I love DiCaprio, but I also thought he was incredibly generous because, whenever he was in a scene with someone else, he gave them the moments, right? I thought this was particularly true of Benicio del Toro. I mean, I think for me, the two performances that really stood out are Sean Penn, who I think is just tremendous. I mean, he's like a caricature, but he's one of those actors who's gauging every effect, always feels true, is someone who's completely despicable and loathsome in every way, and who you can't stop watching and laughing at and kind of understanding. So I thought, on one level, it was him. On another level, the actress whose name I keep forgetting, but who was Perfidia Beverly Hills.
Tiana Taylor.
She I thought was tremendous.
Yeah.
And for things that don't necessarily, have to do with acting skill or whatever, but her presence is so powerful in the film. And she is very good that, I just thought like you're watching the birth of a new star or something. I couldn't stop looking at her. And then, of course, for me, it was like a complete pleasure to watch Benicio del Toro, actually. Yeah, I thought he was fantastic and charming and calm, and true. So I thought they were all brilliant. Yeah, but if I had to rank them, I would actually start with Sean Penn because he's got the most difficult role because it is a caricature, right? And yet, he makes you laugh and care and fear someone like that. Yeah, it's kind of, I think it's astonishing work for me.
I'm glad that you asked this question because I was somewhat cynical about the film first time, and there are things that I was cynical about that I remain cynical about. But there are elements of the film that have really grown on me as well, and I hadn't put enough emphasis on the things that I did like. And one of the things that I really like is everything that Benicio del Toro brings. I think his presence, as you say, that calming presence. The DiCaprio character goes to him, I think, because he doesn't really know anyone else, right? Like he knows that his daughter goes to karate there. He sent her to karate there. And I think that's the only reason. I don't think he really knows him other than that. That's not the impression, because then when he discovers that, he has this whole community, like when they're driving down the road and the kids on skateboards and going, what's going on? And he winds down the window and he basically activates the community. Okay, we're going to snap into gear. This guy needs our help, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes into the flat and doing all that. And he has this kind of presence, but it's also clear that he doesn't know who this guy is, because it's only later that he discovers, oh, you're a member of the French 75. Let's get a selfie. Like, what a joy to know someone who is part of this great group. And I love that whole section where he's trying to get on his phone and charge it up is really, really fucking funny, because, Del Toro is in charge and trying to help him out. And all he wants to do at the time is like, I need to speak to my daughter. I need to charge my phone. And he's shouting at him, like, get off the phone. And when he finally is able to plug his phone in, it feels like such a triumph. He gets on the phone with the guy. And then all of a sudden the argument commences once more about, what time is it on the phone? And I don't know what fucking time it is. And he says at one point, he's just like he's breaking down. And he goes, I wish I need to speak to my daughter and I just cannot answer this question for you of what time it is. And then over in the corner, like making some food, and Del Toro just goes, it's 8:15. Like, he has no idea what's going on really. And he's sort of being helpful, but only half listening. There's everything about that segment I could watch again, very, very easily. I loved it.
There are two sequences. One of them is the first phone call that DiCaprio gets from the woman's voice, going like, Billy Goat's left the nest, like nothing is safe. That scene and the one you're describing of him on the phone while Del Toro is like putting money in an envelope and he's getting the gun from under the bed and he's washing his face. Those two scenes are some of the best stuff I've ever seen DiCaprio do. He's phenomenal in that scene. It's interesting, Jose, that you describe his generosity to Benicio del Toro, because I sort of think that way about the two of them. I feel like that is it looks like a case of two actors who are really embodying, give the scene to the other person. be there for your fellow actors.
Yes,
Both of them seem to be doing it for each other, and it
except an important difference is that Leonardo DiCaprio's the star. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm sure it's his presence that got the money funded at the film funded at the level that it was, right? So for him to kind of give away the scenes to Perfidia and to Sean Penn and to Benicio, it just seems like an amazingly generous, act. Whilst the moments that he does keep, he's brilliant at them. There's no question.
And the last moment, just to go through everything that Benicio del Toro does, the last moment he's on screen is so great. When it cuts back to him, like
sobriety test,
the sobriety test, and that lovely smile that he has when he says, "Oh, I've had a few small beers." I love this guy. I will do. I'm never. This is all I will ever see of Sensei Sergio, and I will watch this film for the rest of my life. Absolutely adoring this character. I think he's one of the best characters in any Paul Thomas Anderson film. He is so beautiful and warm and fantastically well performed. And he has this bizarre outfit on, cowboy boots and like a karate pair of trousers, and then his denim jacket. It's so strange, but he is.
It's not just his line. It's not just his line. As lovely as his line is, a few small beers, which I understand was improvised. I think. That because he knows this isn't a big deal. He's helping his mate out by distracting the cops, and then he can take the piss a little bit. Oh yeah, sure, I'm a bit drunk. Why not? Because it doesn't really matter to him. But it's also when you cut into that scene, is that shot of him with his hands and he dances. He does it in a funny way. Beautiful. Like he's having a little bit of fun with himself, and I really enjoy it. The other thing that I really like, which I want to go back and revisit again, is that whole chase scene that we've mentioned a couple of times. But and I've been sort of talking it up, but I really do think it's brilliant. Like I said in that first podcast, it does feel like they found a road and went, there is a scene to be built out of this road. You know, I can imagine how this is going to look. And it feels extremely storyboarded. Like you have to be absolutely aware of where you're cutting to and who you're seeing in each shot. People were talking about when the third car comes in, which is DiCaprio's, you see it coming back. People were talking about like cheers erupting in the cinema because DiCaprio's there. As much as I like it, one of the reasons I want to go back and revisit it is that I'm unclear, actually, on exactly what everyone knows about each other, because one of the things that's happened up to that point is people have been changing cars. People they ditch a car, they pick up a new one, and they also don't know about everyone who's out there. Like the girl doesn't know that she's being tracked by that tracker. DiCaprio, I don't think knows anything about the tracker. So he's just this rogue character in the middle of it, and so I would like to revisit it to see how much it really holds together in terms of understanding what the characters know about who they're following, even if they actually know they're following the right people. That wasn't really clear to me.
No, I think you're getting at something which is, I mean, I like it. I don't mind it / I really like it. I think it speaks to a sort of a perversity of Paul Thomas Anderson's that I really respond to. He has various perversions. One of them is that an action scene for him is, oh my God, the designer fell over and stood on the dress. We have to fix this dress. That is his action sequence. And the same thing is the case in this one. Obviously, it's much more directly action. But yeah, it's three cars not overtaking each other and there are no obstacles. Willa doesn't know who's behind her, but she needs to get away. She is absolutely petrified. And if anybody's following her in the middle of nowhere, she's getting away. So she doesn't know that there's a tracker. You're absolutely right. Bob doesn't know where anybody is. He just drives in the other direction and then he catches sight of a car. So he follows it. So, and even the tracker, Tim, I don't think necessarily knows that he needs to follow that white car. So there is something just bizarre about these three people just end up finding each other in the middle of nowhere and they're just driving forwards. And she is the one person that decides this needs to come to an end. Whether or not that is a failure of a feature or a bug of the scene, I don't know. But I think there is enough. I would be going into that again, absolutely with the benefit of the doubt, because I think part of what's kind of remarkable about that scene is I think it is fantastically interwoven plot, theme, and poetry. I think it is, and I think the fact that you're absolutely right, it was something, at least again, it's the story that you're hearing, is that that location was found on a location scout.
Oh, is that
And the
right?
scene was developed from that. There's a great, PTA did an onstage with Spielberg at the DGA, and they've put that conversation out on the DGA's podcast. And there's a point where Spielberg goes, "Oh, and then you storyboarded the scene?" And he goes, No, we just worked it out from there. And it's not storyboarded. And I think it comes back to what we were talking earlier about this relationship between control and intuition or taste coming from a very deep, like a bone deep understanding of the story, as well as just an exceptionally high level understanding of how to put a scene together. And I think it can build to, that's why it's a really like peak moment among his films, is that it is not just a well-designed chase scene, but it somehow speaks to what the whole film is about, which is this rise and fall over time. And this idea of sort of catching sight of each other and then disappearing. And at the same time, nobody knows who anybody else even is. They're just following the direction that somebody's going in. And then the agency that she has and the capacity she has to go, the way I deal with this is I stop. And there's something kind of fantastically, it both works on a plot level and it works on a thematic level, and these two are like tied together perfectly. It's such a brilliant sequence.
Nonetheless, I would like to really go and pay attention to it and see how much it hangs together in terms of how much I buy, what the characters know or are supposed to know, or what they suspect. I just slightly query that, basically. But nonetheless, I think it's really good. And the visual impact that it had is absolutely undeniable. It was incredible to look at. When the camera, it must have looked, again, as I say, even better in Vista. But the camera is on a reasonably long lens. So as the camera that's put on the front of the car, it goes down and up and down and up over the hills. The hills visually essentially get really close to you. That kind of, you're sort of zoomed in on them, right? And so... And then they are right in focus as they come close to the frame, and it just looks amazing. Like, it's worth it for its own sake visually. It's a wonderful thing. Like, you are just there, you're admiring the location that they found as much as anything else in that scene. It's just great to have shot it. It looks incredible.
I think it's about time we wrap up. Again, I think we can go on forever, but actually, I think if we are going to go forever, I would like to see the film again before we talk about it. So thank you very much, Stephen. It's been really illuminating, kind of wonderful to talk to you. As always.
This was great. You should, let's watch the film again, and we should talk more, because I think you could talk almost endlessly.
So thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much, Stephen Glass, and thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.